Most fairy tales begin with once upon a time. But Nova's tale began with silence. Not a vow, not a spell, just the closing of her lips and the tightening of her throat as she chose, at the age of 10, to say nothing at all. For 9 years, she never spoke a single word, 8 of which she spent in the palace of the Alpha King. An invisible girl scrubbing floors and folding linens by day, a silent shadow slipping through stone corridors by night. To the courtiers, she was just another servant. To the nobles, forgettable. And to the king, she was no one. Nova had never meant to fall for him. Not when she was nothing more than the mute girl who poured his tea. But love doesn't ask for permission. And her heart, stubborn thing that it was, decided long ago that it belonged to a king who didn't even know her name. He never looked her way, and that was how it had to be. Because Nova wasn't just a servant, she was a princess hidden in plain sight. And her silence wasn't a choice, it was a sacrifice. To speak would doom her brothers to remain forever trapped in wolf form. To save them, she had to weave 6 shirts in secret, in silence, and in suffering. So perhaps, this is not a fairy tale at all, but something older, wilder, more primal. A story of wolves and witches, of curses and kingdoms, of a girl who gave up her voice, not for a prince, but for the lives of the brothers she loved. Or perhaps it is simply the tale of a girl who has loved too deeply for too long, with no hope of her feelings ever being returned. For how could an Alpha King ever notice a servant who cannot speak, cannot call his name, cannot cry out the truth she has held inside for 8 long years? How could he ever see what's been right before him all along? Chapter 1. Moonlight spilled like silver water across the royal gardens. In its ethereal glow, the wolfsbane flowers shimmered, their delicate purple blooms belying their deadly nature. Nova moved silently between the carefully tended beds, selecting only the most mature stems, her touch so gentle that by morning, no one would notice the harvest. 8 years of midnight gatherings had taught her patience. Distant music from the ballroom floated through the night air, a perfect cover for her clandestine work. The king had returned from his northern campaign today, and the court celebrated with characteristic excess. Even the guards who usually patrolled this section lingered by windows, eager for glimpses of the spectacle inside. Which meant the gardens were mercifully deserted. Nova's fingers burned as wolfsbane sap touched her skin, its toxicity causing a familiar tingling. For shifters, the plant was dangerous to touch, deadly if ingested. She endured the discomfort without complaint, filling her leather pouch with the precious blooms. This is for Caden, she thought, selecting a particularly fine specimen. Her eldest brother, whose silver-streaked wolf still carried the regal bearing of the crown prince he once was. And this for Liam, her youngest brother, whose playful spirit somehow survived despite 9 years trapped in a wolf's body. When the burning became too much, she paused and closed her eyes, conjuring memories of her brothers as they once were. Their embraces had sustained her through pain, silence, and years of hiding. 5 shirts completed, the 6th nearly done, lacking only a right sleeve. Just 6 more months of silence, and they would be free. 6 more months of secret harvesting, of weaving by candlelight, of holding her tongue. A twig snapped nearby. Nova froze, heart leaping to her throat. She melted into the shadow of a large topiary, breath shallow and controlled. Footsteps approached, unhurried, confident. Not the brisk pace of a patrolling guard, but the stride of someone who moved freely through every inch of the palace. The footsteps of a king. Nova should flee. Any servant caught in the royal gardens after dark faced severe punishment. But as the figure rounded the hedge, moonlight lit his face, and her breath caught. The Alpha King was here. In the silvery light, his features looked otherworldly, Strong jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes that gleamed with intelligence and restrained wildness. He walked alone, his tall frame moving with predatory grace, his wolf restless, as it always was when he came here searching for peace. This wasn't the first time she had seen him here. In 8 years of silent watching, she'd learned the subtle shifts in his expression. The furrow between his brows when borderland reports troubled him, the faint softening around his eyes when he spoke with children. The garden was her most dangerous harvesting ground, yet she returned night after night, for one reason: a chance to glimpse him. How many nights had she imagined stepping from the shadows? How many times had she composed conversations in her mind, wondering what she might say if her voice were hers to give? Her fingers itched to smooth the tension from his shoulders. Her heart ached to know what troubled him tonight. To offer comfort. She had seen his kindness in secret moments. The gold coins slipped to aging servants when no one was looking, the hours he spent training young guards instead of delegating. So she had fallen in love, not with a crown, but with the man who bore it with reluctant grace. Sometimes the yearning became a physical pain, a hollow ache beneath her ribs that never truly faded. To be so close, yet forever separated by silence and station. To see his smile offered to others, never to her. Her wolf stirred inside her, pressing up against her thoughts with a familiar pull. Mate, it whispered, as it had for 8 years. Mine. Nova silenced it, as always. A foolish fancy. Even if the legends of fated mates were true, even if this pull was more than simple attraction, she could never claim him. Not while her brothers remained cursed. Not while she was bound to silence. Your Majesty? A new voice shattered the moment. A courtier entered the garden, elaborately dressed in celebration finery. Lord Brennan. The king acknowledged him without turning. I requested privacy. Nova knew Brennan well from her silent observations, the king's most trusted advisor, whose counsel he valued above all. I understand that, Your Majesty, but the Queen— I'm certain the Queen can entertain herself for a few moments, the king interrupted, irritation creeping into his tone. She is most eager to discuss the proposed alliance, Brennan pressed. The council believes a union between our kingdoms would bring unprecedented prosperity. Nova's heart stuttered. A union, the king's voice flattened. You speak of marriage as though it were merely a trade agreement. Lord Brennan shifted uneasily. Duty often requires personal sacrifice, sire. The king sighed, dragging a hand through his dark hair. Yes, I'm well acquainted with duty, old friend. Nova's fingers curled into the bark of the tree. Marriage. Her king was being pushed toward marriage. The thought sent a wave of pain through her chest, a crushing pressure that made it hard to breathe. Someone else would stand at his side. Someone else would know his thoughts, his touch, his smile. Someone else would be everything Nova could never be. And she had no choice but to accept it. She had always known it would happen someday. What was she but a silent servant? A shadow? The Queen is beautiful, Lord Brennan offered. And her kingdom's resources would complement ours perfectly. The silver mines alone. I am aware of her assets, the king cut in, as I am aware of the rumors surrounding her previous marriages. Nova leaned forward, straining to hear. Rumors only, sire, Brennan said smoothly. Her first husband died in the rebellion 9 years ago. The others, well, powerful men often have enemies. 3 husbands, all dead within a year of marriage, the king mused. Perhaps I should be flattered she considers me worthy to be the 4th. 3 husbands? A chill crept down Nova's spine. Could this queen— No, it couldn't be. Why would she come here? She didn't need to. The council merely asks that you consider the alliance, Brennan said. Speak with her. Dance with her. Perhaps you'll find her agreeable. The king stared up at the full moon for a long moment, silent. My wolf is restless tonight, he said. As it often is in these gardens, like it's searching for something I cannot name. Nova's heart pounded. Her own wolf whined in response, straining toward him despite her desperate efforts to contain it. "Perhaps what it seeks awaits you in the ballroom," Brennan suggested. The king's laugh held no humor. "Perhaps." He straightened, posture shifting back into that of a monarch. "Very well. Let us return to the celebration." As they turned to go, a breeze stirred the garden. The king paused, nostrils flaring. "Do you smell that?" he asked, turning back toward the shadows where Nova hid. "The gardens are full of strange plants, sire," Brennan replied. "The master gardener cultivates many varieties for medicinal use." For one terrifying moment, the king's gaze swept over Nova's hiding place. She pressed further into the shadows, barely breathing. His eyes, amber even in the moonlight, seemed to pierce the dark. Then the moment passed. He shook his head and followed Brennan back toward the palace. Nova waited until their footsteps faded before allowing herself to breathe. She should return to the servants' quarters, continue weaving, forget what she had heard. But something pulled her toward the palace. A desperate need to see this queen, the woman who might claim what Nova's heart said was hers. Just one glimpse, just to know who she was. Moving silently, Nova crept to the servants' entrance near the great hall. Music and laughter spilled through the doors as servers bustled in and out with trays of wine and food. She slipped inside, hugging the walls where the candlelight didn't reach. The ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles, their light reflecting off jewels and silks as nobles danced and laughed. At the far end, on a dais, stood the king, composed, regal, and beside him. Nova's blood turned to ice. Tall and regal, her silver-white hair arranged in a crown of braids, the woman moved with utter confidence. Her ageless face bore the same cold beauty Nova remembered, the beauty that had enchanted her father, destroyed him. Lady Morwen, Queen of Silvercrest, the witch who had cursed her brothers, the woman who had murdered her father and stolen their throne. And now she stood beside the king, her crimson-tipped fingers resting on his arm, her painted lips curved in a smile that promised ruin. Chapter 2. Nova pressed herself into an alcove behind a heavy tapestry. From this hidden vantage point, she could observe the grand celebration. How Lady Morwen commanded the center of the ballroom as if she had been born to rule Ironhold rather than merely visiting it. The scene was hauntingly familiar. 9 years ago, Nova had watched from behind similar curtains as Morwen charmed her way into her father's court, and his heart. King Caius of Silvercrest had been a strong, vibrant ruler before Morwen's arrival. Nova had been only 6 then, but she remembered clearly how her father would scoop her into his arms, his laughter booming through the castle halls. Then came Morwen, with her bewitching smile and her magical potions. Within weeks of their marriage, her father changed. His vibrant presence dimmed, his eyes grew distant and vacant. He no longer recognized Nova or her brothers, becoming a hollow puppet who echoed only Morwen's words and desires. The court whispered that grief for his late queen had finally caught up with him, but Nova's eldest brother, Caden, suspected darker forces at work. "She's draining him," Caden had whispered one night, after they'd been turned away from their father's chambers for the 5th time, feeding on his life force to strengthen her magic. They had planned to confront Morwen, to demand answers, but they never got the chance. One night, Liam, her youngest brother, had burst into her chamber, panic in his eyes. "We have to leave. Now," he'd hissed, pulling her from bed. "Father is dead. Morwen claims we poisoned him. The guards are coming for us." They fled into the night, seeking refuge in the dense forests bordering their kingdom. For 3 years, they lived as fugitives, moving constantly to stay ahead of Morwen's hunters. Nova's childhood vanished in those woods, replaced by harsh lessons in survival. Then came the night Morwen's witch hunters finally caught up with them. Nova closed her eyes against the memory, the clearing lit by witch fire, her brothers shifting to wolf form to protect her, Morwen's cruel laughter as she cast her curse. "Let your beast forms become your prison," she had proclaimed, silver light enveloping the 6 princes. "Let your human minds watch helplessly from within." Only Nova had escaped the curse, hidden beneath fallen leaves by Liam's quick thinking before he transformed. She had lain motionless, scarcely breathing, as Morwen declared the princess surely dead in the wilderness, her brothers now mindless beasts to be hunted for sport. That very night, her grandmother's spirit had come to her in a dream, revealing the cure. 6 shirts woven from silver wolfsbane. Complete silence until all are finished. This alone will break the curse on your brothers. Nova wandered for months, searching for enough wolfsbane to begin her task, until she learned of King Daemon's famous gardens. Taking a position in his kitchens had been her salvation, abundant wolfsbane and the safety of anonymity. Now, watching Morwen circle Daemon like a predator sizing up prey, Nova recognized the pattern unfolding again. Was Silvercrest no longer enough? Did Morwen now desire Ironhold too? Seeking to add Daemon's kingdom to her collection through marriage, before disposing of him like she had Nova's father. The thought of Daemon's strength fading, his vibrant spirit dimming to nothing, made Nova physically ill. Her fingers curled into fists, nails biting into her palms. She should warn him. She had to. But how? She had never learned to read or write. Her education cut short when she fled the castle at 6. Even if she broke her vow of silence, risking her brother's permanent curse, would a king believe accusations from a mute servant girl? And Morwen. Morwen would recognize her instantly, would silence her permanently before she could reveal the truth. Nova's mind raced with impossible choices as she watched Morwen laugh at something Daemon said, her hand lingering too long on his arm. The witch's ruby ring, the same one she had worn when casting the curse, glinted in the candlelight, a reminder of her power. As the night wore on, Nova noticed Daemon growing increasingly weary of the diplomatic pleasantries. He maintained his kingly composure, but she recognized the subtle signs of fatigue, the slight stiffness in his shoulders, the smile that no longer reached his eyes. Finally, after exchanging words with Lord Brennan, he made his excuses to the court. "I must retire earlier than planned," she heard him say. "Tomorrow's negotiations require a clear mind." Morwen's painted lips formed a disappointed pout. "The night is still young, Your Majesty." "For some, perhaps," Daemon replied smoothly. "I look forward to continuing our discussions tomorrow." He bowed formally over Morwen's hand, not quite kissing it, Nova noted with a flicker of satisfaction, before departing the ballroom. Several courtiers followed. Morwen remained, her calculating gaze tracking him until he vanished from view. The moment he was gone, Nova saw a shift in Morwen's demeanor. The witch's charming smile dimmed, replaced by cold determination. She scanned the room until her eyes landed on a servant girl carrying a tray of wine goblets. Irene, a quiet girl who worked the upper floors, including the royal chambers. Nova watched as Morwen beckoned her with an imperious gesture. Irene approached, head bowed. They spoke briefly, Morwen's lips barely moving. Then, with practiced sleight of hand, the witch pressed something into Irene's palm, a vial and several gold coins, both disappearing quickly into the girl's pocket. Movement at the edge of the ballroom caught Nova's eye. Irene, another servant from the upper halls, slipped away from the celebration. Nothing unusual, except for the furtive glance she cast toward Morwen before vanishing through a side door. More concerning still was the small vial clutched in her hand, a vial that hadn't been there moments ago. Instinct prickled along Nova's spine. With a final glance at Morwen, now surrounded by fawning courtiers, Nova slipped from her hiding place to follow Irene. The servant corridors were mostly empty, most staff busy with the celebration. Nova kept to the shadows, maintaining distance as she tracked Irene through the winding halls. To her surprise, Irene didn't head toward the kitchens or servants' quarters, but up the grand staircase toward the royal wing, an area forbidden to most servants. Nova hesitated. Following meant leaving the relative safety of the lower halls. If she was caught, there would be questions, punishments. But something was wrong. She felt it. Clinging to the wall, she climbed the stairs silently, pausing at each landing to make sure Irene hadn't noticed her. At the top, she glimpsed the girl turning down the corridor toward the king's private chambers. Nova's heart pounded. Irene was going to Damon's rooms, immediately after speaking to Morwen. The pattern was too familiar, too dangerous to ignore. She slipped into a nearby alcove as Irene approached the guards outside the king's study. "Evening wine for His Majesty," she heard her say. To Nova's horror, the guards nodded and let her through. Nova moved quickly. At the refreshment station nearby, she grabbed a silver tray of sliced fruits, something a kitchen servant might plausibly deliver, and hurried forward. "Another refreshment for His Majesty?" one guard asked, raising an eyebrow. Nova nodded, gesturing subtly toward Irene. The guard shrugged. "Very well. He's asked not to be disturbed. Don't linger." The door opened. Nova followed close behind. The king's private study was spacious yet intimate, firelight casting warm shadows across dark paneled walls. Maps and books lined the shelves. A heavy desk stood near the windows overlooking the gardens. And there, seated before the fire, was Damon. He'd changed from formal attire, now in a loose white shirt and dark breeches. His collar was open, his hair tousled. The fire gilded his skin, outlining the strong lines of his face, his chest. He looked younger, human. Nova's throat went dry. In 8 years of secret longing, she'd never seen him like this. Her wolf stirred. Warmth flooded her veins. "Mate," it whispered. "Ours." "Your evening wine, Your Majesty," Irene said, curtsying. "Just set it there," Damon said distractedly, not looking up. "Thank you." As she placed the goblet, Nova saw Irene tip the vial's contents into the wine with a flick of her wrist. The liquid shimmered briefly, then settled, its danger cloaked in glamour. "Will there be anything else, Your Majesty?" Irene asked. "No, that will be all." As Irene turned to leave, she noticed Nova. Her eyes narrowed. Nova stepped forward quickly, setting her fruit platter beside the wine. Damon barely glanced at her. Then his hand reached for the goblet. Without thinking, Nova moved. Her sleeve brushed the glass. It tipped and spilled, red wine blooming like blood across the table and floor. Damon bolted upright. Nova froze. And then he looked at her. Really looked. Time seemed to slow. The crackling fire, Irene's gasp, the spreading wine, all faded to insignificance as their eyes met and held. A flicker of bewilderment crossed his face, followed by something deeper, more primal. His pupils dilated, the amber of his irises darkening to molten gold. Nova couldn't breathe, couldn't move. 8 years of yearning crystallized into this single, impossible moment. I'll fetch cloths immediately, Your Majesty," Irene stammered from somewhere far away, her voice thin and unimportant in the charged silence. The king gave no sign he'd heard. Instead, he took a step toward Nova, then another, drawn by something beyond conscious thought. The firelight cast half his face in shadow, but his eyes, those eyes that had haunted her dreams, remained fixed on hers with an intensity that made her heart stutter. "Who are you?" he breathed, the question filled with wonder. Nova's lips parted of their own accord, 8 years of stored words rushing to the surface. "Yours!" her heart cried out. "I'm yours." For one dangerous moment, she nearly broke her vow, nearly sacrificed her brothers for the chance to answer him. Horror washed over her as she realized how close she'd come to speaking. 6 shirts completed, but the vow still stood. 6 more months of silence required. With a strangled gasp, Nova whirled and fled the chamber, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Chapter 3. Nova hadn't slept. Every time she did, she saw those amber eyes turning gold, heard his voice again. Dawn found her curled by the window, the nearly finished 6th shirt clutched in trembling hands. The wolfsbane fibers seared her skin, but the pain was nothing compared to the storm inside her. In fitful dreams, Morwen had laughed as she dragged Nova before the court. The lost princess, she'd declared, poison on her lips, treachery in her heart. Her brothers had watched from the forest's edge, their wolf eyes filled with accusation. You almost spoke. You nearly doomed us for him. Nova shoved the memories away. She tucked the shirt beneath her thin mattress and forced herself to prepare for the day. She was being foolish. He wouldn't remember her. She was no one, just a servant who had spilled wine and fled. What mattered now was keeping Morwen away from Daemon. The potion in the wine made her intent clear. But how could a mute servant girl protect a king? These thoughts swirled as Nova slipped into her place in the bustling kitchen. She kept her head down, chopping vegetables with practiced speed. No one mentioned last night's incident, which meant Irene had kept silent. A relief. More ginger in the porridge, the head cook barked, passing between tables. His Majesty requested it yesterday. Nova allowed herself a quiet smile. Daemon always asked for more ginger when the weather cooled, one of many tiny details she had quietly collected over the years. The familiar kitchen chaos enveloped her, steam, clattering pots, shouted orders. It was comforting. Here she was invisible, safe, until everything stopped. The silence hit like a dropped plate. Nova froze mid-chop, her knife suspended in air. "Your Majesty?" the head cook stammered, wiping his hands as he bowed. Nova's heart lurched. Slowly she turned, already knowing who stood in the doorway. King Daemon Blackthorn. No crown, no armor, just a dark tunic and quiet authority. Brennan and the steward flanked him, both looking equally stunned by the king's presence. "Please, continue your work," Daemon said, his deep voice settling over the room. "I don't wish to disrupt the morning preparations." The kitchen came back to life, but with stiff, self-conscious movements. Whispers stirred behind every ladle and chopping board. Nova ducked her head and resumed her task, hands trembling. Maybe if she stayed small, unseen, he wouldn't notice her. "Please don't see me," she thought. "Please don't remember." She felt him moving closer, his presence unmistakable. The head cook guided him proudly through the stations. Then, "And here we prepare the morning fruits and vegetables, Your Majesty." He was directly behind her now. Nova's shoulders tensed. She didn't breathe. "Ah," Daemon said, his voice brushing over her like velvet. "There you are." The certainty in his tone was a blow, as if he'd been searching for her. Still, she didn't lift her head, couldn't meet his eyes. Her wolf strained toward him, but Nova kept her focus on the cutting board. "You're the girl from last night," Daemon continued. A statement, not a question. The room went still again. "Your Majesty," the cook said nervously, "has this girl caused some offense? I assure you she will be disciplined appropriately." "No offense," Daemon said gently. Nova felt him step closer. She gripped the knife tighter, as if it could root her to the ground. Then, his fingers brushed beneath her chin, lifting her face. She resisted the urge to flinch, forcing herself to meet the gaze that haunted her dreams. Up close, she saw every detail. The gold flecks in his amber eyes, the faint scar over his brow, the softness in his expression. No cold mask, no royal detachment. Just him. Curious, intense, and something more. Something that called to the wild thing inside her. "You never told me your name," he said softly, the words meant for her alone, though they echoed in the silence. Her lips parted. The need to answer rose so fast she bit the inside of her cheek to stop it. She couldn't speak. Not yet. Not for 6 more months.